Jfashion classifications outside of Japan. Let's talk about this. Hello, everyone. Welcome to or welcome back. Today, we're diving into a topic that's perhaps under-discussed in the Jfashion community, the classifications within Japanese fashion or Jfashion, and how they're perceived and applied inside of Japan and especially outside of Japan. So I posted this video on my TikTok, my YouTube, my Instagram, and it got tons of views, tons of likes, and quite a bit of comments. So there's obviously a conversation around this.
Let's talk about Japanese fashion discussed in Western contexts versus their actual perception and discussion in Japan. Went to the famed Shibuya 109 that I have been seeing all over social media on my fourth trip to Japan. I'm not a Japanese fashion expert. Jfashion is enjoyed all over the world, but it seems that there are terms that are circulating outside of Japan that are not really pertinent in Japan. While shopping at the Nail Perch store, I asked the Japanese associate who worked there what type of style the clothing was, and she was like confused by me even asking, and she replied, Lolita? Spoke to a fashionista who is living in Japan who speaks Japanese, and she told me that people aren't really that particular about all of these different sub-style terms. It seems that some Western interpretations are inadvertently imposing structures on Japanese fashion that don't really exist in the original context. There are terms that seem to be used within specific J-fashion communities in Japan, but classifying in general seems to be more fluid.
In my original post, some people were saying that they agreed that the classifications are too strict outside of Japan. There needs to be some more fluidity, that there is more fluidity within the classifications inside Japan. One person also said that it reminds them of how people were up in arms about how you should not wear pants in Jirai-K substyle, and that is the first time that I had heard that as well. What do you guys think? Can you wear pants in Jirai-K? I don't know. I'm not a fashion expert, so I'm not too sure what is the right answer. What is the right answer with these substyles and these terms? This is what we're talking about in this video. Someone also had shared with me that they thought that the associate at Nail Perch store regarding my short video said the term Lolita because that's a term that me as a foreigner would understand. But I was speaking in English and I felt that she understood what I was saying. Some people have said that the Nail Perch store does offer Lolita pieces so that it makes sense to them, that's why the associate had said that to me. Someone else had said that their fashion is Fairy K, went to defend their argument by linking me a article from the Tokyo fashion website. But I kind of responded to that argument that the Tokyo fashion website was a website created for people who were perhaps interested in fashion outside of Tokyo. And so that website is written in English. It's not exactly a Japanese hub in Japanese language for Japanese persons. And so I was wondering, is the term Fairy K an English term that was created and then adopted within Japan? Yes, the brand uses the hashtag Fairy K on their Instagram account, but are they just using that for marketing purposes? There isn't an actual Japanese equivalent hashtag, in katakana that says Fairy K, although there were some other hashtags in Japanese that I noticed they were using within that aesthetic of like fairy. I think there was one that said fairy in katakana. So I'm curious. I'm not an expert. I'm opening up a conversation for all of you experts to share with me and to shed some light on these topics, these sub-style terms. What are the correct terms? And I'm just curious if Japanese people today care about these terms. I told the associate at the Nail Perch store that it reminded me of baby aesthetic, like nursery room. I was like, oh yeah, this really reminds me of nursery room. And she was like, oh yeah, nursery room. She like kind of agreed with what I was saying. But when I asked her about the style of clothing, she just seemed confused. So I reiterated and I spoke again and said, like, what type of fashion? And then it seemed that she understood that I was saying, but she was kind of confused, like, who cares? Like, Lolita? Like, why are we talking about this type of thing? So maybe she was just busy. I don't know. Maybe she didn't want to speak to me, but it seems that she wanted to speak to me. We were talking about out of Green Gables. We were talking about some other things. I don't exactly remember what, but we had an open conversation. So I think she understood what I was saying. But I also spoke to a fashionista who is living in Tokyo. I'm going to upload that interview later on, spoiler alert. And she speaks Japanese. She's been living in Tokyo for 3 years. She's been very much in the Japanese fashion community for very many years. She was popular in France as well for expressing herself in Lolita. She was featured in a teen magazine, maybe Teen Elle, I can't remember. And she told me that from her experience is that these terms aren't really used that much in the Japanese language on social media or even within Japan, at least not today, as much as they are used outside of Japan, and that there isn't really any infighting in the Japanese communities within these terms. So back in the 1990s and early 2000s, Japan saw the rise of distinct fashion subcultures like Lolita, Gyaru, Visual Kei, and Decora. And I think that has been obvious to even a very beginner Japanese fashionista. It seems that these styles were more than just clothing choices, that they were expressions of identity, individuality, rebellion, and creativity. And there's a lot of conversation around all of that as well, especially with Gyaru, and some controversy with it as well, right, with the tanned skin. Magazines like Fruits, Kara, and Egg, to name a few. I remember seeing the Fruits at like the Chapters store, and Gwen Stefani had shared with the world Harajuku girls. So obviously at that time, and the people like Gwen Stefani and these magazines, they played a significant role in documenting and defining these particular styles, providing guidelines, inspirations for enthusiasts outside of Japan. Fast forward to now, 2025, and the Japanese fashion scene has evolved, but the production of niche magazines has not evolved within it, and apparently many have stopped in production. I read that in my comment section as well. So while many of the niche styles remain, with dedicated brands to specific styles like Angelic Pretty to Lolita, or Doki Doki 6% to Decora, or Naomi to Jirai Kei, Liz Lisa is kind of like shifting into the Ryo Sangata. That's what I believe, or that's what I had seen. Maybe now within Japan, there's perhaps more a shift towards individual expression over strict adherence to specific categories. I know that content creators have been talking about Gyaru and the comeback of Gyaru fashion, and maybe because it's become so popular outside of Japan, into Tokyo as being popular, it never really left, and maybe now there is a resurrection. Let's circle back to outside of Japan. Okay, so the Jfashion classification system, it seems to me, is this whole other ball game. It's this whole other beast outside of Japan. So interestingly enough, in this Western Jfashion community, there is a very strong emphasis on maintaining and preserving these traditional Jfashion categories. And I think that's great. I think that's awesome. Enthusiasts often dedicate themselves to specific styles, meticulously following guidelines to achieve authenticity within that particular style. And this is also happening in Japan as well. Online forums and social media groups frequently discuss the correct way to embody a particular style, sometimes leading to debates, gatekeeping, and just straight up drama. However, contemporary fashion within Japan, Japanese fashion magazines emphasize more so, I think, personal style and elements from various subcultures, which defies the rigid classification on Jfashion outside of Japan. When you look at magazines like Vogue, like Nylon Japan, and Vogue and Nylon outside of Japan, they showcase a diverse range of styles reflecting fluidity. But of course, within Japan, there are still very niche enthusiasts who dedicate their style to one particular category. And that was evident to me just by walking around in Tokyo. But I did see mostly the Jirai Kei and the Ryo Sangata, a little bit of like kind of a goth grunge vibe. But I didn't really see too many like Gyaru in person. I did see a lot of that like schoolgirl or kogal. I know kogal is not a sub-style term. I've been reminded of that, I think, many times. But I did see a lot of teenage girls dressing up in the leg warmers and in the uniforms. And I did see a store that was dedicated to just buying a school uniform that's not your school uniform, but that you would just wear it outside of school in terms of like being a fashion statement. The impact of the internet today and the online world of Japanese fashion outside of Japan has played this pivotal role in preserving and transforming Jfashion, which I think is really great. Platforms like Reddit, TikTok, Instagram have allowed global communities to share, learn, and evolve within these styles. But of course, everyone has their own opinions, and there's going to be arguments with those opinions. this global exchange brings its own challenges, and the desire for authenticity can sometimes clash with the evolving nature of fashion actually happening in Tokyo, leading to tensions between traditionalists and modernists within the community. But this is the J fashion community outside of Japan. What about these tensions in Japan? Are they even present? Or are they really just a J fashion Western thing? Which, does that sound weird? J fashion Western. I mean, it's existing. It's happening right now. So this brings me to a broader question, or brings us to a broader question. How do we navigate the balance between honoring the origins of J fashion and its substyles, but also embracing its evolution? Is it possible that people outside of Japan might be clinging too tightly to the classifications and maybe might be passing judgment where it's just not appropriate? We might be missing out on the essence of what makes fashion dynamic and expressive. Moreover, how do we ensure that our interpretations and adaptations of Japanese fashion are respectful and not appropriative? For example, I briefly saw some infighting in the Fairy K in the J fashion community outside of Japan. So we'll call this the Western J fashion community. And it made me question if a Japanese fashion forward person would instigate these same dramas online, considering the concept of tatemae and hon, I believe that's how you say it, where a Japanese person typically has like their personal opinions that they don't show others, and then they have like their public opinion, which is a lot more subdued and probably has nothing to do with what they actually think and feel. I wondered if the discussions about Japanese substyles which occur outside of Japan are discussed within Japan today in that same light, in that same context. It's essential to foster open dialogues within the fashion community. Understanding the cultural context, the history, and evolution of J fashion can lead to a more informed and respectful participation. So by sharing our experiences, asking questions, being open to learning, we can appreciate the richness of J fashion without imposing rigid boundaries or being mean to each other on the internet. I wanted to open a dialogue with you guys and find out, what are your thoughts? Have you experienced the tension between traditional classifications and modern interpretations in J fashion? Have you been to Tokyo? Have you been into Japanese fashion outside of Tokyo? Do you think strict adherence to style categories enhances or hinders personal expression? I wonder if one were to interview 100 fashion-forward persons between the ages of 15 and 75 who have been living in Japan their whole lives, even Tokyo or like a major city, to accumulate popular different kinds of magazines from different eras and different seasons from Japan within those eras, to look at music, movies, pop culture. If after all of that information were to be collected and dissected, if only then could terms be properly understood and applied, used from the history of Japanese fashion inside and then after used outside in Japan. It's evident that there is a J fashion community outside of Japan, and I'm wondering what you guys all think and feel about that. I'm also curious about if fashion forward people in Japan, or Japanese people in general, if they know that there is this huge community outside of Japan utilizing Japanese fashion terms written in English from Japan, a community outside of Japan with persons who have never visited Japan, but they're super passionate about Japanese fashion. I wonder if Japanese people care about this at all, if they're not aware of it and they really don't care. Obviously, brands should care, and persons who are in the fashion industry from Japan should care about what's going on outside of Japan, of course. I wonder if your average 16-year-old super jiraikei ryosengata fashionista who only speaks Japanese is even aware of this at all on the internet, who only follows probably mostly Japanese, other Japanese fashionistas, is even aware of these communities outside of Japan. Your insights and experiences are invaluable in understanding the ever-evolving landscape of J fashion. If you are a Japanese person yourself, I would love to hear from you. And thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you guys in another video.